Today's episode of Passionate Talk is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audio download and 30-day free trial at books.passionatetalk.com. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Get your 30-day free trial and free audiobook at books.passionatetalk.com. Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Passionate Talk. I'm your host, Gary Karp, and this is episode number 37. Today's episode is the second part of my conversation with relationship coach and alternative lifestyle counselor, Aisha-Sky Gates. Now, on today's episode, Aisha is going to share her personal stories, the stories of her growing up, the stories of her experience with abusive relationships and sexual predators, and how that influenced and impacted her life and her decision to do the work that she is doing and write the wonderful book that she has. Now, I do want to let you know that these conversations that we do have, these stories that Aisha shares, may not be the best for children to listen to. So if you have kids anywhere in the hearing area, anywhere listening where you are, you may want to wait until they're in the other room to play this section of our conversation. So, with that caveat, I want you to sit back, relax, grab a cup of coffee, maybe some tea, and get ready to listen to the second half of my conversation with Aisha. They don't think beyond the marriage, beyond the ceremony and the big party. And that's really, in my opinion, where the heavy lifting begins.
Yes. So another thing about how I wrote the book is that I am coaching the reader to use the dating period as the deliberate setup for how the committed relationship gets formed. So the dating isn't coincidental. It's a deliberate process into how you want to work with this person if you are both wanting the committed relationship. So dating, first of all, it's this, you're weeding through people. But as the book also coaches you about what you're looking for and how you're conducting yourself. The book also coaches you about getting clearer and clearer about your own needs. You don't come to the table empty-handed, or that this is the first time you're thinking about what do you want. So you should have lots of conversations with yourself about what your own needs are, and observing in your own life where you're the happiest and what pushes your buttons, and what do you do about it, right? Are you very family oriented? Maybe you're not. What does career do for you? Is it just a job? Does it speak to your own identity? What is that for you? And so that has implications for what you're bringing into the personal relationship.
Now, I know that we've spoken about how you got the idea for the book from working with many of your clients. So there's definitely a professional, and I'm guessing there's an academic reason why you wrote the book, but there also has to be a personal reason why you chose to write this particular book and make this your passion and your intent to empower others to get relationships that they want, even if they're not those traditional egalitarian relationships. Could you share a few stories, or one, if you choose to, on how you came to write this book, how this idea of non-egalitarian, unequal partnerships came to you in your life,
Yes, then this is the hardest part to talk about. Not for an emotional reason, but just an organizational reason. It's kind of unwieldy, but I'll do my best. So let's start that with the fact that I grew up from the mid 50s into the early 70s. So that's my childhood.
Okay, so we're talking the Ozzy Harriet era straight into psychedelics.
Yeah, good.
Okay.
That's very good. Yeah, Ozzy and Harriet is in my head, definitely there. And my lovely parents, they were social climbers. They did their darndest. I want to point out that I'm African American. That's a significant piece of the story here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Especially in that time frame, yes.
You take that time frame, and that I am not a white American. I'm African American.
Now, did you grow up in the South, in the North, where did you grow up so we can get a better idea of how that impacted you being an African American growing up?
Yeah, I grew up in Missouri. I was born in St. Louis.
Okay.
So I started in the city, and then halfway through childhood, my parents moved us out into the country to a little town dominated by German Americans. And that's where my story picks up. Because in the city, then I was surrounded by my own family members. I was surrounded by other African Americans, um, and fairly diverse uh, cultures. And always white teachers, with some exceptions. So I don't remember now, fourth grade, I think. Yeah, fourth grade. Then I had Mr. Jordan, and who was African American, and that matters. All right. But when my parents moved out, and so my parents were, my parents didn't start out with very much resource wise, but wow, they really scuffed and scraped. They were intent on that they own their own home, for instance, that we were in a what they thought of as a good neighborhood where we could go to school and be safe. These are the kinds of things that they had in their heads. Um, when conditions changed and they wanted, like, their friends to move out of the city, we went out into the country. That's where my family was able to find a house. My teachers, my teachers tortured me. There's no other word for that. So I was 10 years old. I was a 10-year-old little kid who didn't look like them. I had
Mm-hmm.
just finished intelligence tests. Remember how those used to be really popular. And I should have gone into, what is that called? Gifted, a gifted program. Yeah, back then
Mm-hmm.
there were such things, but they were conducted on college campuses. But the fact that my
Mm-hmm.
parents moved out of the city, then I couldn't go to the program that was available. We moved out into this little town. What did they do with this gifted little girl that didn't look like them? They put her in the lowest class they had.
Based upon the way you look, I'm guessing not the intelligence you were showing.
Well, they never spoke of that exam that I took or that I was gifted.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They never brought it up, ever, ever. And the teacher in that low class was kind to me, and she must have said something. It's like, what is she doing in here? And then they put me in the highest class that they had, and that teacher tortured me every day. She found ways to make me feel as though I were under her foot.
Mm.
So, what I'm saying now has implications for what happens years later as I go to college. When I go to college, all kinds of sexual predators come out of the closet and were after us young girls. Um, and at, I made it through freshman year but the beginning of sophomore year, I was sexually attacked in my dorm room. That's just rape. And the attacker was counting on me to work with him to hide what he was doing. That he was counting on that it meant everything to make sure that the other girls didn't know anything because because it would be held against me. And he was right. He was absolutely right about that. So even though
Mm-hmm.
he was the perpetrator, shortly after that, the other girls assumed that I had simply had sex, uh, and so I was slut shamed.
Yep.
Yeah. Um, I could not get my head together to study after that and was failing. And no one came to my assistance about, well, what's really going on with you? Because back then, nobody asked you, what did you want? How did you feel? I've talked to
Mm-hmm.
so many people that are my age peers, and they all say the same thing. It's like, are you kidding me? Your parents didn't ask you how you felt? Because their parents didn't ask them how they felt.
It was just a situation where there were some things you didn't talk about: sex, politics, religions, especially the younger generations, the upstarts. We didn't know what we were doing when we were kids. We had no life experience. Therefore, our feelings were determined to not be valid.
Yes, exactly. That's right. So even if you tried to have what we'd say, a touchy-feely kind of conversation, you would be quickly led away from that. Other women that I've talked to too, who were sexually assaulted as children or as young adults, if they did say something to their parents quickly covered it all up, and it was very clear, don't talk about that. And maybe with the best of intentions, that if we don't talk about it, then you'll be able to just go on with your life.
Yes, it'll just go
Yeah, it
away.
doesn't go away.
That's what I was always told. Leave it alone. It'll just go away. It's temporary. You won't even remember this.
Yeah, oh goodness, it couldn't be more wrong.
Yep.
Okay, so then my early adult life has after that, I married someone who I left college with someone that I was in school with. Um, and we married down there in Arkansas. There was no wedding. We were married by a clerk in a closet at
Ooh,
lunchtime because
wow.
he couldn't find an open room. So he said, "I'm sorry," and let us into a broom closet and said the words, right? And signed the paper for us. We were married. Um, the person that I married, um, was not a good guy. Apparently, he was with me because he was pretty dysfunctional and wasn't able to do his own life. So I was a means to get him through school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and a long way down the line, many years later and children later, then I got him through graduate school, including writing his thesis. So I was just a means, and he was cruel. Um, so it must have been in my mentality that I didn't deserve better than that. So all of this lumps together to create a huge motivation inside me to design differently, to help people to realize that, yeah, you do. You have choice. That sure, we all got set up with societal expectations. Um, we are all taught to be the heterosexual male of that kind of mentality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep.
even if you're not.
Yep.
Yeah, and this thing about egalitarianism, we're all taught the same ideas about females being the nurturers and best suited to support the males. We females are set up to give our free labor. If you think an example would be that we are the ones who almost absolutely, we're the ones who care for children and we care for the elderly. If our in-laws are ill or just old, or our own parents, who are the caretakers? The females are.
Mm-hmm.
In the cities and the where there's a lot of gun violence, then males are injuring each other. And who's caring for those injured males? It's the female relatives and
The
their
women.
families. We're all taught that poverty is just a thing, right? That it's kind of by accident. Well, no, it isn't. It was designed, someone's designing for poverty. We're keeping a certain number of people on the bottom to serve the rest of us. These things are designed for. That means that we can also design otherwise. We can, go ahead.
I was going to say that's absolutely correct. And of course, to explore the rhyme and the reason and the power base of why we design poverty to keep a certain group of people in that poverty state and keep them under the thumb. That's a discussion for another show, another time. And if you'd like to, you can come on back and we could have that discussion, because that's an entirely different subject, but it does tie into what you are talking about and the experiences that you went through. Now, I am curious, you were talking about the gentleman that you ended up getting married in the closet by, which I just was sitting here and shaking my head when you said that.
I did. Yeah.
How much, because of the way you were brought up and the indoctrination that you were brought up, and you believe that you were not worthy of a better relationship, do you think that codependency played a part in that relationship?
Absolutely. Sure. I did not. So he was playing on all of the societal ideas that you and I are touching on today. So, rather like the person who attacked me in my dorm room. So, that person was very mindful of how society had set things up, of how women thought of sex, how the other girls in my school were going to think about me. Yeah. The person that I married was very mindful of of these misogynistic ideas about the power slant in our society and how he could use all of that in my head to control me.
So, when was the moment where you realized this and you went, no, this is my life. I am the one who's going to control it. I am the one who's going to deny it. Let's try that one again. I am the one who's going to design it, and really took control of your own destiny and started to shape and manifest it. When did that take place?
Okay, well, there were moments like that, Gary, within the married years. Yeah, there were moments, and then he would find a way to re-rope me in. So, and meanwhile, over it was 16 years worth. So over because part of my setup was the idea that you marry for life. That's what the
Mm-hmm.
women in my family did. And if it was a bad setup for you, then your
You
job
just dealt with it. Yeah.
your job was to handle that.
Very dangerous belief, in my opinion.
Oh, well, it didn't do me any good. So I believed, I thought, so my cultural setup, was to stay with him. I thought that I had to help him. I had to get him to be better. And he kept feeding me the idea that that was my job, that I had to help him to, that I had to get him to be healthier. When no, it was not my job. Uh, um, and over those years, then another way that he controlled me was using other women. So um, his sexual contact with other women, he made sure I knew about, and that he kind of brought them into our sphere and kind of smeared me with, look, I wouldn't even have anything to do with this person if you were a better wife. So, and eventually, the man that I'm married to, once I had gotten him his degrees, then he looked at me and said, "You know, you're below me now."
He what?
Yeah, he did.
Oh my God. And he still was standing.
He was literally standing over me. I was sitting down.
What?
Yes. He had been involved with his students romantically. Yep, right. Okay, so at
Wow.
the story with the marriage ends with he demanded that we divorce, and that he wasn't going to waste any money on lawyers, uh, that I had better read and find out how to get this divorce. And I think we actually got the divorce when then he demanded that so it was the middle of the night when he demanded that I get out of the house, that I had better get out of there. So of course I could give more details about that, but let's move on. And so this business of power and control, there's power and control in all kinds of relationships. Where is it not? But we can turn that, and oh, I know, you asked me, how did I begin to come into my own? That's it. Yeah. Sorry,
Hmm.
Gary.
Oh, it's
Okay.
not a problem. That's what Passionate Talk is all about. We just go organically and we learn the stories, and occasionally we off road, but that's perfectly okay.
Thanks. Okay, so I'm on my own. I was homeless and living out of my car. And I thought that it was going to be an easy thing to get to my children, that all I had to do was just tell people what had happened. It wasn't. It was terrible. It was absolutely terrible, because he had convinced me that I didn't have any money, that our money wasn't my money. And so it took me a whole year before I could even get a lawyer. And then she wasn't very good. She was actually intimidated by his lawyer. So
Hmm.
it's not a pretty story. Um, but there is a climbing out of how I had been taught to think about myself. I Beginning with Marianne Williamson.
Yeah. Oh my Lord, I'm trying to remember. I know the name. I'm just trying to pick a book. What was the book that impacted you from Marianne Williamson?
A woman's worth, and but the one before that, the one that she's like super super famous for. Oh, I have it on my shelf, Gary. But
Yeah,
someone,
I can't think of the name.
yeah. Well, before I finish, maybe I can put my hands on it. But someone handed me an audio tape of that book. And I would say that that was the beginnings, the very, very beginnings of my beginning to realize that, oh, I have been led astray. I have been fooled. I have been tricked. And led away from being who I am. From there, I had 10 years worth of psychotherapy with a spiritualist psychotherapist who loved me into being me, um, and getting on my feet, um, reaching for spirit, and understanding that I am spirit's child more than I am my parents' child.
And that book by Marianne Williamson was A Course in Miracles.
All her books are based on A Course in Miracles. The book where you and I are talking about is called A Return to Love.
Okay, yes. The one I first was introduced to Marianne Williamson was A Course in Miracles. That's the one that always pops into my head. But that second book, Course in Love, that second book, which is A Return to Love, is a wonderful book in itself.
Yes, indeed. It's the beginning of saving me. And my spiritualist psychotherapist, who later became my spiritual mentor, her name was Mariah, and she knew where I was headed. Such a blessing. She just knew that she said one day you're going to have your own school, that you're going to be teaching, you're going to counsel others, and your story is going to help save other people, and help them to find their true voice and identity. And that's what everything that I write and all my teachings are about, helping others to express their God self through their relationships, how you relate to others. What's more spiritual than that?
And that's absolutely correct. And that's a beautiful story that you just shared with us. And I want to thank you for sharing it, because it's not easy talking about things like that. But the fact that you can look at the story and the experiences you had and use them to inspire and empower other people to move forward is truly a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Well, thank you. Yes, of course. I use all of my experiences to express who I am. So I'm not fighting that I went through adversity. Absolutely not. Instead, that's reality. And those experiences have shaped me and given me the ability to hear in a deep way what's going on for my clients, anyone that I'm trying to help. I can hear them. I can hear what's under their words, their needs and their desires, and a whole lot about who they are.
And right now, Aisha, we're going to come to my favorite part of this show for as long as I've been doing this. And that is, if there is a person right now who's entering the dating world, or maybe they're inside of the dating world, what one piece of advice, practical advice, would you give them to ensure they had that healthy relationship, whether it's an egalitarian or a non-egalitarian, unequal relationship? And also, if a person is already in a relationship that they're not happy with, what one piece of practical advice could you give them to course correct?
Oh, I think it's that word design. For me, the word design holds, when you unpack it, it holds heaven itself in it. It says, you can have what you want, you can have what you need. If you can hold on to that idea that I deserve to be happy, that would be my piece of advice. If I have to pick one, Gary, it's the idea that I deserve to be happy. I deserve. Why? Because Spirit said so. Because that's how the universe set things up for real. That we were not built to suffer.
And that book, again, folks, is called Unequal Partnerships, a dating guide for loving non-egalitarian relationships. And I believe it's available on Amazon, correct?
Yes, it's actually available anywhere and everywhere that books are sold. If you don't see it on the shelf, then just ask for it and they'll order it for you.
Okay. So if you want to pick up that book, you can walk into your local Barnes & Noble or Borders or mom and pop bookstore in your neighborhood and pick it up. If it's not there, talk to the owner and ask them to bring in a copy. You could head on over to Amazon and just click your way to it. And 2 days later, if you've got Prime, it'll be delivered to you. Now, Aisha, I want to give you a moment to let people know how they can get in touch with you and what you can help them with, what services you offer. So why don't you tell people where they can find you and how you can support them?
Okay. First, I want to point out my 2 websites. So, if you specifically are looking to me for counseling, then you want gatescounseling.com. You'll also see the book listed on that site too. But on gatescounseling.com, there's a contact form, and you can use it to say whatever you like or to ask me a question. My second site is my name. Aisha-Sky is my first name. Aisha-Sky. My last name is Gates. Aisha-Sky Gates.com is my new author site, and it will give you lots more information about what's in the book for you. And you'll get a sense of me too. At least I hope so, across that site. Um, Things that I do. I do life coaching. I do relationship coaching and counseling. And um, I do a lot of coaching and counseling with individuals. Someone pointed out that every time they hear me speak, I'm always talking about relationships and couples. But individuals can come to me for care too, any kind of life issues. So I practice what's called life positive counseling.
Oh, I like that term. That's a really great term. I love that term.
It means that you don't have to have a problem or an issue. You just want to talk to a competent person. Um, so you'll notice that my sites ha- make no reference to trauma. I've seen some other websites that are these long lists of all the horrible things that can happen to people and all kinds of medical conditions. And there's none of that in my sites or in my attitude or my practice. So, life positive. It's let's see how we can do this, is my attitude.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I take you from where you actually are, and my job is to help you to see what you have in your hands, what an enormous gift that you are, and how you can go forth from there to get everything you want.
Well, folks, as you can tell, Aisha has been through a lot, and she is an extremely passionate person about wanting to help people further their lives, further their relationships, and really get into a relationship that is healthy and supportive of who they are, whether that is a traditional egalitarian or an alternative lifestyle that may be non egalitarian. And if you want to learn more about her, and you didn't have time or you were not in an area where you can write down those links, they will all be on the show page at www.passionatetalk.com. Just head on over there, click on the link for Aisha's interview. You can listen to the interview, get show notes, timestamps of all our conversations and the highlights there, and all the information on how to contact Aisha and how to order her book from Amazon, or you can walk into your local brick and mortar and pick it up, will be there as well. Aisha, I do want to thank you very much for spending some time and sharing your stories with us today. Is there any last words you want to leave our listeners with?
Gary, I enjoyed this very much. I really love connecting with other people. That's it.
Well, Aisha, I do want to thank you very much, and we will talk with you later.
Thank you, Gary.
Those stories were riveting. I want to thank Aisha for being so open and honest and raw, and in sharing the stories that she did. Sharing those stories to allow others to be inspired and empowered to support us in finding those relationships that are truly special, that will be fair to us so we could be happy and healthy. I love the truth nugget that she dropped from her spiritual mentor when she said, "You deserve to be happy. I deserve to be happy." That's the spiritual message. That was the biggest truth nugget that I took away from this conversation. I also love how Aisha shared with us that a book, a simple book by Marianne Williamson, Return to Love, that was given to her by a friend, started her on her journey of self-discovery and on her spiritual journey to where she is now happy. All it takes is that one thing, folks, that audio book, that television program, that movie, that conversation with that someone special, or maybe even a stranger, and it can turn your entire life around. Well, that's all the time we have for this week's edition of Passionate Talk. So until next week, follow your dreams and passions and manifest the life you choose. Hey folks, it's Gary. If you want to get your free copy of Marianne Williamson's Return to Love, you could do so by visiting books.passionatetalk.com. Not only will you get your free copy of Return to Love, but you'll also get 30 days free of audible.com. Audible has over 80,000 books to choose from each and every month, so you'll always find something interesting to listen to. So visit books.passionatetalk.com and get your free copy of Marianne Williamson's Return to Love and 30 days free from audible.com.